Thank you, Lloyd. And I'll try to go through fairly quick, but also give you enough information as to what motivated us. The panel that just proceeded really gave good motivation, explained some of the drivers, because the state of Washington, with their SEPA process, is actually requiring a life cycle analysis for greenhouse gas emissions for a commodity that may be exported through these terminals. And one commodity may be coal. So I'll get a little bit into, just cover that quickly because that was already covered, but why a greenhouse life cycle analysis and what it is, some information and answers that are sought, and a little bit about our approach that we are taking on the technological advancements in carbon capture, utilization, and storage that are in the R&D pipeline. So a lot of us don't hear about that because it's not mainstream, it's not being utilized yet, and a lot of times technology developers keep things secret until they're ready to commercialize because they don't want their competitors to get a leg up on them or undermine what they're doing and share some of the wrap up there. So we already heard the state of Washington has required this under their review. There's an article you can go to that kind of talks a little bit about it, but you heard a lot very good today from the people who are right on the front lines that really covered it, so I'll just jump past this. And we also heard that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said it's beyond the scope of the National Environmental Protection Act, but the state is setting a new precedent, very unprecedented action and ramifications, as Joe and had already indicated. So this is sort of a high-level analysis or just illustration of what it is. It includes the mining operation, it includes the transport from the mine, it includes the terminal and the processing at the terminal and the loading on the ships and the transport by ship and the end-use combustion at the country that it's delivered to. There's a lot of other details involved there, and I'll show that in an upcoming slide. So here's a more detailed analysis, or balloon chart, if you will, that the Department of Energy has put together that kind of describes their process. They call it going cradle to busbar. Well, we're going to add not just busbar, but cradle to CCUS on top of this, so the CO2 isn't just going into the atmosphere, and we'll get credit for that. If you see down in the bottom left on the blue area, raw material, they even go back to the emission and footprint for production of ammonium nitrate as an explosive that will be used at the mining process. So that's included as well. In the middle section, you see the raw material transport, looking at roll, rail, and barging. You look at the diesel fuel, the electricity, diesel, and the foreign rail, and the bus bar. Some of the things that are also included in there, take for example the energy conversion. They will look at the energy and the footprint for building that coal power plant. And they'll drive that down to the detail of what's the energy and emissions footprint for making the steel that goes into making that boiler, that power plant. So that's the level of accounting detail that they go into. And we're going to target the three countries. Really interested in what we heard today, that the Australia and Indonesian coals are facing some price pressures that will actually probably make PRB coal even more financially attractive when we get through these kind of activities. So we've been talking about this too for a little while. Some of our technology, Dr. Al Bland and his team are here, that one of the advantages that hasn't been tapped into is PRB coal is delivering water with it. And so there's also a life cycle footprint associated with power plants extracting and using water from the local community. So in this case, something that has never been monetized as a value of this subbituminous coal is the fact that it has 28 to 30% water in it. So we're going to put a valve on that and extract that water, and that will help reduce the water consumption, production, and energy cost and emissions footprint at the local end use. And we also get more energy efficiency gains. So we heard earlier today that a more energy efficient plant also lowers the life cycle footprint as well. So there are actually about a 2 to 4% energy efficiency gain that can be gained by drying the coal before it goes into the boiler. And also the boiler can actually be smaller for a net power output. So then the carbon footprint of producing that boiler producing the steel that produces that boiler, you see the cascading benefits of making efficiency improvements in different parts of the whole, say, call it the social system. And this is a illustration of the pilot plant that Dr. Al Bland and his team put together. It lowers local water consumption by about 50 to 60% because we're using and tapping into the water that's already in the coal. It also captures the mercury before it goes into the boiler, so you get some additional efficiencies and ease of other emission control capture technologies. So this is to give an example of some of the technologies people talked about. Well, what are the technologies that may help address the attacks? So now we can focus on solutions and not just environmental-oriented attack concerns. This just shows a little bit. The water comes out, it's a drying process, so there's no combustion. The water is clean for irrigation and livestock use as it is. So we can clean it up for boiler feed, use it in scrubbers and cooling towers. And so it's a very nice feature, especially if the coal or the power plant is in a drought-constrained or water-constrained community. We're delivering water with the coal. It has never been monetized. There's never been a value put onto that. So what we're also going to look at are the technologies in carbon capture and utilization that deal with the big 800-pound gorilla, and that's the CO2 that comes out of the power plant. So there's just some illustrations. You can have industrial chemicals, there's ways to convert that, methanol, industrial minerals, plastics, transportation fuels, enhanced oil recovery opportunities, food and beverage, enhanced agriculture. And this is a slide that was provided by the Department of Energy several years ago that shows, you see in the vertical columns, cost reduction for CO2 capture and their anticipated timeline of commercialization. On the bottom left where it says amine, that's the technology that's being used by SAS Power. That's been used on nuclear submarines for over half a century to take CO2 out of the atmosphere so we can protect the health of the sailors on those submarines. So you can see the advantages that's anticipated in the R&D community and we advance these technologies if we have ample funding to do that. And we think part of the life cycle analysis will actually help us provide a case to take the DC to really enforce bolstering and strengthening those budgets for R&D in these technology areas, because then they can see the net societal system benefits. And that's one of the outcomes that we hope to achieve on this area. Biological process, that allows like algae or Al and his guys have a chemoautotrophic bacteria. It does not need sunlight. So it's a way they live on, consume CO2. We inhale oxygen. These biological species inhale CO2, and the population grows. In their cell is a lipid oil, has a nice carbon chain that's amenable for making biodiesel. So there's a way for these energy-impoverished countries that we heard about, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, to recycle, reuse that carbon and coal by utilizing that CO2, diverting it from going into the atmosphere, converting it to a transportation fuel, and helping their energy security, which helps their economic security. So we think they could be very good first adopters of these kind of technologies when the technologies tend to be a little higher price, given that their cost of energy is much higher than the US cost of energy is. This, hopefully you can see, but these slides will be available. This is in the National Energy Technology Laboratories, their R&D program. And this is some of the things that they say you can do with CO2. You can enhance oil recovery, enhance gas recovery, make polycarbonate polymers, so moving towards plastics. You can even produce foods with algae or use it as a greenhouse, enhancing gas, in a greenhouse agricultural system where you accelerate plant growth. In some cases, you may get 2 or 3 crop cycles in a year. So if you're trying to feed resources that are constrained on food supplies, then here's a way to help out with the nutrition and health of the population as well. You can make chemicals, fertilizers, even things like dry ice, fire extinguishers. So there's a whole spectrum. Their analysis has indicated that just one of these things alone is not enough to deal with the quantity of CO2. But the combination of all these things with enhanced oil recovery could get you to that reduction, substantial reduction in CO2 emissions, while providing economic value to those communities. So that's the key. Now we're turning CO2 not into just a toxic, hazardous substance that should be prevented or disposed of, pumped underground at great expense. Now we're turning into something that it creates other usable benefits and value for society. So that's the idea. And this, what I want to show here, they use what's called a technology readiness level. I have a little slide, you can read about that later. It's a little more detailed. But these are a couple of 3 technologies that they have in their carbon use and reuse research. Polycarbonate plastics, mineral elements, and chemicals. And they're targeting avoiding CO2 emission value at $10 per metric ton. That's fairly low. Some circles you're hearing 50, 60, even $100 per metric ton. So if these technologies are considered valuable at $10 per metric ton, it could be more valuable at higher prices. So you see the timeline. I put the TRLs where the slight shading and colors transition, anticipating it might be harder for you to see, but you can see around 2020, there we go, that they're thinking things could be in the development technology TRL 5 and 6. And then by 2025, you might have the mineralization elements becoming at large scale, ready for commercial deployment or evaluation at commercial scale. Then a little bit later. Now, that's based on their projections on the budget funding levels that they get. If they get more money, they can actually move these things up quicker. So that's what we will hope to take to Washington, D.C., to encourage them and promote that there's a lot of upside to enhance their budget. And I'll be in D.C. next week talking to a few folks to help do that. And this slide here, maybe more for you to read, but to give you an idea, what does a technology readiness level mean and how they're using it. And you can see in their sense, 5 and 6 is pilot scale, right about there in the middle, maybe 1 to 20 megawatts. And it's about 4 or 6 years, you're at $5 to $7 million. Pre-commercial demonstration, maybe your TRL 7, 50 to 200 megawatts, maybe 50 to $100 million. So you can see if you're trying to advance a portfolio of options for carbon capture and utilization, you can't just do it on the fossil energy budget. That's, talking about $400 million a year with all the other things that they're doing in that fossil energy budget. So we really need to bolster that up. And this, you can read probably a little later, but it gives a little more description of what they consider when they're evaluating the maturity of those technologies, where they view them in the R&D progressive technology readiness pipeline. Oops. And this is kind of show you how I kind of just cartoonish envision it. Well, it got me 5 minutes. I think I'm getting there. So this is maybe where we are today. We get CO2 emissions from a coal power plant. We get CO2 emissions from oil imports. We get CO2 emissions from a refinery. And we get CO2 emissions coming out of our cars. That's the societal perspective for power and transportation, which are viewed as the 2 biggest sources of CO2 greenhouse gases. So if we were to look a little differently on capturing and utilizing that CO2, what if we take that CO2, divert it from the central power plant, send it into a conversion process, a biological to make transportation fuels? Well, we're probably not going to use 100% of that CO2, but you can see we already got a significant reduction in CO2 emissions. And then that biological, biodiesel fuel from coal will still have the transportation sector emissions unless vehicles become more fuel efficient. But what we also do is we just took away the CO2 emissions for transporting oil and for refining oil. So some of the things that we're striving to get to is we want more factual data. We heard there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns that are being raised by environmentalists that really are highly speculative, or maybe they're more just strategy, tactical diversion things to help them win their case rather than really bring forth the truth so a good informed social decision can be made. So that's kind of the heart of what we're doing here. We will establish a reference baseline, and that'll look at our parents' coal, maybe even our grandparents' coal, how plants were designed and during our grandparents' era, because a lot of the plants that are in existence today were designed back then. And so this is half a century later. We got better technologies. Not all of them are in place yet, but they are in the pipeline to be deployable within the next 8 to 10 years. And so we'll be able to take credit for that. It gives better efficiency, improve water efficiency, it will lower other pollution emissions, and so all the benefits will increase. Talk about, I'm kind of trying, how much time we got, Lloyd? 4 minutes, okay. So maybe I'll just jump to this slide. So really big picture, we want to elucidate that the performance gains and benefits for tomorrow's cleaner coal are going to be better compared to yesterday's clean coal. So clean coal technology has advanced in the last couple of decades. We have better air, lower NOx, lower SOx emissions, things of that nature. And now we're going to the next new and improved. I remember when a kid growing up, I always heard new and improved, Ivory soap, new and improved this. Well, this is new and improved clean coal. And that's what's coming, and that's what's, we need to really advocate, and I think doing this societal life cycle system analysis will show that making improvements in one area has significant system-wide benefits. And that's the key outcome that we're pursuing. Funding, the Infrastructure Authority has authorized up to $60,000 for a study with Duke University and the University of Calgary. So international effort, and Al Bland from Western Research Institute is helping them. The National Energy Technology Laboratory is doing their own study using their own funds. We started talking to them. They thought this was important enough that they did not ask for any money from the state. They're going to do their study, their analysis, using their own funds. For them, it helps them address a societal national policy issue, but they also manage the clean coal R&D program in the CCUS technology. So this will help them set what are the performance and cost targets that the projects in their R&D program need to aim for in order to be successful. So this will help validate and also guide the research as well. And our participants, talked to those folks already. I want to thank Joe Ritzman and all the folks, Wendy. Thank you very much for all your input and helping educate us about the issues and the process that you're going through and how things operate. That's really been really helpful. We do these kind of things. We need to make sure we're asking the right questions, we understand things. The Global CCS Institute, they do an annual review on carbon capture and utilization technology maturity. They're going to contribute their input into the assessment on the potential for carbon capture and utilization in a life cycle analysis. Arch Coal Southern Company has also evaluated a lot of carbon capture and utilization in their carbon capture management program. We're going to include that, as well as the technologies that the Department of Energy in their annual report they put out.
Question from the audience. We'll get this one first.
Which of these do you see having the greatest potential in the next decade to sequester large volumes of carbon? I mean, you talk about concrete, uses concrete, plastics, algae. Which of those do you think really have the potential in the 10-year, start coming online within the next 10 or 15 years to really take large volumes of carbon and sequester it?
That's a good question. And I kind of look at it from who the first adopters are going to be and what are their needs. I really think we really need a portfolio of solutions because not every location can take advantage of, say, enhanced oil recovery. So we need a whole basket of different solutions. And if the three, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, are probably a better position to be early adopters. Cost of energy in the U.S. is very low compared to what it is in those countries. But yet we have a highly abundant supply of natural gas and oil to produce transportation fuels. So the competition to create a transportation fuel through CCUS in the U.S. It's going to have some more barriers. But Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, they're importing oil, they're importing natural gas for energy and transportation issues and needs. If they can create a transportation fuel, that adds to their energy security because they don't need to import it, but it also gets rid of that carbon life cycle footprint of importing that oil and bringing that in. So I think from a strategic national perspective, those countries will probably want to focus on energy security first and foremost. Then they may consider enhanced cement or other minerals that they may be able to use in their manufacturing processes that will help them reduce further imports. Because they're not only are they energy impoverished, they're generally very resource impoverished. And yet they do kind of have a production, manufacturing, economic part of their engine, but that requires them to import that from somebody else. So there's another energy or economic security issue for them.
Question I would ask is, are you including the cost of energy or the amount of energy and the extra carbon dioxide to provide the energy for the processing in these various processes?
Yes, yeah, that'll all be included. So we first kind of started thinking about carbon utilization say 7, 8 years ago, but thinking of it's a significant amount of energy to capture, compress, and store CO2 underground. And there's a lot of bit of cost to do that. And the net benefit is you don't have that CO2 in the atmosphere, but there's no other social benefit. So if we could use that energy and those financial costs and produce something that's beneficial and useful in society, then we're far better off than that conventional option. If the energy consumption and the cost is even lower, they were even much better than that conventional option.
So let's give Don a hand, please.